Good morning, Year 6. Welcome back. Today I'm going to be reading Chapter 2 of Kensuke's Kingdom, Water, Water Everywhere. And as you can see, I actually have a copy of the book now. About half an hour after I finished filming Chapter 1, postman arrived with the book, so I can read from the text, which I prefer, than reading from my Kindle. Okay, Chapter 2, Water, Water Everywhere. They say that water covers 2/3 of the Earth's surface. It certainly looks like that when you're out there, and it feels like it too. Seawater, rainwater, all of it is wet. I spent most of the time soaked to the skin. I wore all the right gear, Skipples made sure of that, but somehow the wet still got through. Down below too, everything was damp, even the sleeping bags. Only when the sun shone and the sea had stopped its heaving could we begin to dry out. We would haul everything out on deck, and soon the Peggy Sue would be dressed overall, one great washing line from bow to stern. To be dry again was a real luxury, but we always knew it would not last for long. You may think that there was not a lot for 3 people to do on board, day after day, week after week. You'd be wrong. In daylight, there was never a dull moment. I was always kept busy, taking in sail, winching in, letting out, taking my turn at the wheel, which I loved, or helping my father with his endless mending and fixing. He often needed another pair of hands to hold and steady as he drilled or hammered or screwed or sawed. I'd forever be mopping up, brewing up, washing up, drying up. I'd be lying if I said I loved it all. I didn't, but there was never a dull moment. Only one of the crew was allowed to be idle, Stella Artois, and she was always idle. With nothing much to bark at on the open sea, she spent the rougher days curled up on my bed down in the cabin, which was fine and calm, though she could usually be found up on watch at the bow, alert for something, anything that wasn't just sea. You could be sure if there was anything out there, she'd spot it soon enough. An escort of porpoises, perhaps, diving in and out of the waves. A family of dolphins swimming alongside, so close you could reach out and touch them. Whales, sharks, even turtles. We saw them all. My mother would be taking photographs, video and still, while my father and I fought over the binoculars. But Stella Artois was in her element, a proper sheepdog again, barking her commands at the creatures of the sea, herding them up from the deep. Annoying as she could be, she would bring her smelly wetness of her everywhere. We never once regretted bringing her along with us. She was our greatest comfort. When the sea tossed and churned us, and my mother felt like death from seasickness, she'd sit down below, white to the gills, with Stella on her lap, cuddling and being cuddled. And when I was terrified by the mountainous seas and the screaming wind, I would curl up with Stella on my bunk, bury my head in her neck, and hold her tight. At times like that, and I don't suppose that they were that frequent, it's just that I remember them so vividly, I always kept Eddie's football close beside me as well. The football became a sort of talisman for me, a lucky charm, and it really seemed to work too. After all, every storm did blow itself out in the end, and afterwards we were always still there, still alive, and still afloat. I'd hoped my mother and father might forget all about the planned schoolwork. And to begin with, it seemed as if they had. But once we'd weathered a few storms, once we were settled and well into our voyage, they sat me down and told me the unwelcome news. Like it or not, I was going to have to keep up with my schoolwork. My mother was adamant about it. Sounds like a lot of you at the moment with homeschooling, I can imagine. I could see that any appeals to my father would be pointless. He just shrugged and said, "Mum's the skipper," and that was the end of the matter. At least at home she'd be my mother and I could argue with her, but not on the Peggy Sue, not anymore. It was a conspiracy between them. They devised an entire programme of work. There were maths course books to get through. My father would help me if I got stuck, he said. For geography and history, I was to find out and record all that I could about every country we visited as we went around the world. For environmental studies and art, I was to note down and draw all the birds we saw, all the creatures and plants we came across. My mother made a particular point of teaching me navigation too. Barnacle Bill taught me, she said. I'm teaching you. I know it's not on a curriculum, but so what? It can come in handy. You never know. She taught me how to use the sextant, take compass bearings, plot a course on the chart. I had to fill in the longitude and latitude in the ship's log every morning, every evening, without fail. I don't think I'd ever really noticed stars before. Now whenever I was on watch in the cockpit at night with the Peggy Sue and her wind vane self-steering, the others asleep below, the stars would be my only company. Gazing up at them, I felt sometimes that we were the last people alive on the whole planet. There was just us and the dark sea about us and the millions of stars above. It was on watch that night. It was on watch at night that I would often do my English. This was my own version of the ship's log. I didn't have to show it to them, but I was encouraged to write in it every 3 weeks. It would be, they said, my own personal private record of our voyage. At school, I'd never been much good at writing. I could never think of what to write or how to begin. But on the Peggy Sue, I found that I could open up my logbook and just write. There was always so much I wanted to say. And that's the thing. I found I didn't really write it down at all. Rather, I said it. I spoke it from my head, down my arm, through my fingers and my pencil, and onto the page. And that's how it reads to me now, all these years later, like me talking. I'm looking at my log now. The paper is a bit crinkled, and the page is yellowed with age. My scribbly writing is a little faded, but it's mostly quite legible. What follows are just a few chosen extracts from this log. The entries are quite short, but they tell the tale. This is how I recorded our great journey. This is how it was for an 11-year-old boy as we rode the wide oceans of the world on board the Peggy Sue. So there is his logbook. Now, chapter 3 is really long, very, very long. It would probably take me about half an hour to read. So I'm going to read some of chapter 3 today. So it's chapter 3, Ship's Log. September 20th. It's 5 in the morning. I'm on watch in the cockpit and no one else is awake. We left Southampton 10 days ago now. The channel was full of tankers. There were dozens of them going up and down, so either Mum or Dad took turns on watch the first 2 nights. They wouldn't let me. I don't know why not. There wasn't any fog, and I can see as well as they can. We were planning on sailing about 200 miles a day. That's about 8 knots. But in the first week, we were lucky if we made 50 miles a day. Barnacle Bill warned us about the Bay of Biscay, so we were expecting it to be bad. And it was. Force 9 gale, force 10 sometimes. We were slammed about all over the place. I thought we'd sink. I really did. Once when we came upon the top of a wave, I saw the bow of the Peggy Sue pointing straight up at the moon. It was like she was going to take off. Then we were hurled down the other side so fast, I was sure we were going to the bottom. It was bad. I mean, it was horrible. Really horrible. But the Peggy Sue didn't fall apart and we made it to Spain. And, sorry, got a guest appearance from Cookie. Come on, out the way. She doesn't want to get in the camera, she just wants to get in the way. Mum gets quite snappy with us sometimes when we don't do things right. Dad doesn't seem to mind, not out here, not at sea. He just winks at me and we get on with it. They play a lot of chess together when it's calm enough. Dad's winning so far, 5 games to 3. Mum says she's not bothered, but she is. I can tell. We only spent a couple of days in La Coruna. Mum slept a lot. She was really tired. Dad did some work on the rudder cable while we were there. He's still not happy with it though. We set off for the Azores 2 days ago. Yesterday was the best day we've had for sailing. Strong breeze, blue sky, and warm sun to dry things out. My blue shorts blew off the washing line into the sea. It doesn't matter. I never liked them much anyway. We saw gannets slicing into the sea all around us this afternoon. Really excellent. So the Artois went mad. I'm fed up with baked beans already, and there's still stacks of them down below. October 11th. Today, I saw Africa. It was in the distance, but Mum said it was definitely Africa. We were going down the west coast. Mum showed me on the chart. The wind will take us down the coast for a few hundred miles, then across the Atlantic to South America. We mustn't drift, of course, else we'll get into doldrums. There's no wind there at all, and we could just sit there becalmed for weeks. Forever, maybe. It's the hottest day we've had. Dad's very red in the face and the tops of his ears are peeling. I'm more nutty brown like Mum. Saw a flying fish early this morning, and so did Stella. Then Mum spotted a shark off the port bow. A basking shark, she thought. I got the binoculars out, but I never saw it. She said to write it down in my notebook anyway, and then draw it. I looked them up. They're massive, but they don't eat people, just fish and plankton. I like doing my drawings. My best one so far is a flying fish. I sent a card to Eddie from the Cape Verde Islands. I wish he could be here. We'd have a real laugh. Stella loves to chase the football around the cabin and pounce on it. She'll puncture it one day. I know she will. Dad's been a bit gloomy and Mum's gone to lie down. She's got a headache. I think they've had a bit of a tiff. Don't know what about exactly, but I think it's about chess. Okay, I'm going to stop there and I will continue on with chapter 3 tomorrow. Okay, so go onto the home learning page. We've got some activities linked to today's text for you on there, and I will see you with the rest of chapter 3 tomorrow. Bye, Year 6.